rights, foremost of which their independent state with East Jerusalem as its capital on the 1967 borders. The establishment of an independent Palestinian state within a just and permanent solution is in the interest of the Israeli and Palestinian peoples. We will not achieve this goal except with a serious partner who is aware of the importance of renouncing discord and ending the occupation and all forms of aggression so that we can reach together the desired peace in the Middle East. Mr. President, apart from committing a major crime by rigging wireless communication devices and exploding them simultaneously across thousands of people with total disregard for their identity or location, Israel is currently waging a war on Lebanon, and no one knows to what extent this war could escalate. This is what we have repeatedly warned against. If the brutal war on Gaza does not end, this systematic destructive war must stop. And this is the choice before Israel, as its leaders know very well. They know that it will neither bring security nor peace to northern Israel nor to Lebanon, and that the key to security rests on a just peace. Stop the aggression on Gaza. Stop the war on Lebanon. In brotherly Yemen, we look forward to preserving the 2022 truce and proceeding therefrom towards a comprehensive ceasefire, resolving the crisis, ensuring Yemen's unity, and achieving the aspirations of its brotherly people through negotiations between the Yemeni parties based on the outcomes of the national dialogue, the Gulf Initiative, and relevant Security Council resolutions. As regards to the crisis in Syria, and since the beginning of the crisis, the position of the State of Qatar has been clear, and that is that Qatar is keen on the interests of brotherly Syrian people, hoping that the parties and countries involved in the crisis will be convinced of the necessity for dialogue and understanding to end this crisis in accordance with the Geneva Declaration 1 and Security Council Resolution 2254 in a way that will achieve the aspirations of the Syrian people and preserve Syria's unity, sovereignty, and independence. Regarding the Sudanese issue, we call on all the Sudanese parties to stop the fighting, and we reaffirm our support for all regional and international efforts to end this crisis in a way that will ensure the unity of state institutions and the sovereignty and stability of Sudan. In Libya, we support the political trajectory and the implementation of Security Council resolutions, and we urge all parties to recourse to dialogue and overcome differences in order to complete the comprehensive national reconciliation, preserve the progress and gains achieved on the security, political, and economic tracks, and unify state institutions. Arab countries cannot achieve security and stability without the existence of firmly established states capable of legislating and enforcing the law, developing and implementing national policies. No state can firmly be established and be stable in the presence of armed factions that are not under its control. These are self-evident and unquestionable matters. Ladies and gentlemen, the war between Russia and Ukraine has caused great human suffering and left repercussions on Europe and the world. We reiterate our call on all parties to implement the provisions of the Charter of the United Nations and the rules of international law to seek to find a peaceful solution as the only possible solution. In this context, and based on our firm belief in the principle of peaceful settlement of disputes, we have made a tangible contribution over the past year as Qatari mediation led to prisoner swap between the United States and Venezuela. And dozens of Ukrainian children were reunited with their families after being separated by the war. Finally, we affirm that the State of Qatar will spare no effort in working with its international partners and the United Nations to firmly consolidate the pillars of peace, security, sustainable development, human rights, and the rule of law at all levels, and to address global challenges in order to achieve a better future for all. Thank you, and may the peace, mercy, and blessings of God be upon you.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the Emir of the State of Qatar. The Assembly will now hear an address by His Excellency Matamela Cyril Ramaphosa, President of the Republic of South Africa. I request protocol to escort His Excellency. I invite him to address the Assembly.
Thank you, Your Excellency, the Chair of the Assembly. We take this opportunity to thank the United Nations Assembly to give us a chance to speak. 30 years ago, South Africa was born as a new nation, equal, united, and free from apartheid. We adopted a new constitution as the birth certificate of our new nation. Our first democratic elections brought the tyranny of apartheid to an end, a system that this General Assembly had declared to be a crime against humanity. In adopting Resolution 2202A in 1966, as later endorsed by the Security Council in 1985, the United Nations was a beacon of hope in our quest for justice. The great wave of solidarity of the peoples of the world, led by the United Nations, turned the tide against apartheid. Today, democracy flourishes in South Africa. We have a progressive constitution, an entrenched human rights culture, and strong institutions. We have laws to advance equality and programs to protect society's most marginalized and vulnerable. We continue to transform our economy so that it is in a more competitive position to create jobs, to attract more investment, and that it should benefit all. South Africa is a party to global treaties on human rights, gender equality, children's rights, refugee protection, and environmental protection. A few days ago, South Africa also endorsed the pact that charts the course for a better future for global governance and towards the attainment of the Sustainable Development Goals. As signatory to the Paris Agreement, we are contributing our fair share towards the global effort and have a just energy transition plan to guide our carbon journey and climate resilient development. Through the African Union, we are working to advance Agenda 2063. We're involved in mediation and conflict resolution across our continent and actively contribute to peacekeeping missions. Our political culture has evolved and it continues to mature. We have just held our 7th free and fair general elections since our democracy, paving the way for the formation of the Government of National Unity. 10 political parties have coalesced around a common agenda for economic growth, job creation, poverty eradication, and sustainable development. South Africa is in a new era, an era of great promise. In what some have called our second miracle, South Africans of all races have rallied behind the government of national unity. We are making headway in resolving some of our most pressing challenges. Our economy has started to improve, and investor confidence is on the rise. Our country's prospects look bright, and we look to the future with great hope. The South African story bears witness to the enduring role of the United Nations in global matters. In supporting our struggle, the United Nations affirmed the principles of the UN Charter, the fundamental human rights, the dignity and worth of every person, and the equal rights of nations, large and small. It affirmed the aspiration contained in the Universal Declaration of Rights that we should strive for a world free of barbarous acts that outrage the conscience of humankind. Genocide was declared to be a stain on the conscience of the world, and the world community took a stand against genocide. Apartheid was declared a crime against humanity and a stain on the conscience of the world. The United Nations took a stand against apartheid. These were seen as crimes against humanity then, and they continue to be crimes against humanity now. It has been 11 months since the Hamas attack that killed 1,200 people and where hostages were taken. As South Africa, we have condemned this attack. In response, Israel embarked on an act of collective punishment in its assault on the people of Gaza. The torment of the people of Gaza continues unabated. More than 41,000 Palestinians have been killed. Homes, hospitals, churches, mosques, and schools lie destroyed. Famine and disease stalk the streets of Gaza. This cannot but shock our collective humanity. The violence the Palestinian people are being subjected to is a grim continuation of more than half a century of apartheid that has been perpetrated against Palestinians by Israel. We South Africans know what apartheid looks like. We lived through apartheid. We suffered and died under apartheid. We will not remain silent and watch as apartheid is perpetrated against others. Through the United Nations and the instruments it wields, we must end the suffering that Palestinians are being subjected to. We are called upon to uphold the principles of the UN Charter and to uphold consistently and in their entirety the fundamental tenets of international law. International law cannot be applied selectively. No one state is more equal than any other. In December last year, South Africa approached the International Court of Justice, seeking an order to prevent Israel from committing genocide against the people of Gaza. We did so in terms of our obligations as a state party to the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. As South Africa, we welcome the support that a number of countries have given to the case that we have launched at the ICJ. The ICJ's orders make it clear that there is a plausible case of genocide against the people of Gaza. They further make it clear that states must also act to prevent genocide by Israel and to ensure that they are not themselves party to the violation of the Genocide Convention by aiding or assisting in the commission of genocide. We reiterate our call for an immediate ceasefire and for the release of all hostages. The only lasting solution is the establishment of a Palestinian state, a state that will exist side by side with Israel, with East Jerusalem as its capital. Our moral conscience further demands that we exert every effort to bring peace also to other countries, especially the eastern part of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, to Sudan, to Ukraine, and other parts of the African continent. We must realize the aspirations of the people of Western Sahara to self-determination. Achieving and maintaining peace and security requires the collective will of the community of nations gathered here. It requires that the UN Security Council should be a more representative body and inclusive. 78 years since its formation, the structure of the United Nations Security Council remains largely unchanged. Africa and its 1.4 billion people remain excluded from its key decision-making structures. This cannot continue. The Security Council has not fulfilled its mandate to maintain international peace and security. The UN Security Council must be reformed as a matter of agency. We would like to see the Security Council being more inclusive so that the voices of all nations can be heard and be considered. It cannot remain an exclusive club of just 5 nations to the exclusion of the many nations in the world. Africa stands ready to play its role in building a safer global order by participating in the work of the UN Security Council on the basis of respect and acceptance. The African Union and its member states are engaged in mediation, in dialogue and diplomacy across our continent to create conditions under which peace and development can take hold. There must be greater collaboration between the United Nations and the African Union towards resolving a number of conflicts and also in addressing the root causes of conflicts that continue to rage. Pandemics and endemics pose a serious threat to us all. We are concerned by the spread of mpox across the world and in Africa in particular. We urge the international community to mobilize vaccines and other medical countermeasures for deployment where they are most needed. Economic prosperity is key to sustainable peace. Through the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, we are establishing the foundation for a massive increase in trade and investment and infrastructure in our continent. The AFCFTA will further integrate regional economies and accelerate Africa's industrialization and economic growth. The climate crisis is now a full-blown climate emergency in the world. It impacts very devastatingly to both countries and citizens of many countries. Extreme weather, such as flooding, fires, and droughts, are wreaking havoc on societies, economies, and the livelihoods of ordinary people. Despite being least responsible for climate change, developing economy countries, and particularly African countries, are bearing the brunt of what they did not create and are in the front line. As South Africa, we remain committed to contributing our fair share to reduce global emissions, guided by the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities. We have adaptation and mitigation programs and policies in place and have passed a climate change law to further support our emissions reduction targets. It is essential that climate actions do not deepen global inequality or stifle the developmental aspirations of the Global South. The industrialized nations are not honoring their climate commitments, and we repeat the call for predictable and sustainable financing for climate action. We must operationalize the agreed-upon climate financing and capacity-building instruments to advance mitigation and adaptation. Pursuing sustainable development necessitates that those with greater means should support those who lack them. The world faces annual financing gap of some $4 trillion to achieve sustainable development. We call on better resourced countries to scale up their levels of support to developing economy countries. Debt is the millstone around the neck of many developing economy countries, stifling their potential and development. Debt servicing is robbing a number of countries of much-needed funds to support health, education, and social spending. South Africa endorses the United Nations Secretary General's call for the reform of the global financial architecture to enable developing economy countries to lift themselves out of the quicksand of debt. We must commit to systems for financing development that are more accessible, agile, and equitable. In 2025, South Africa will assume the presidency of the G20. We will use this important role to advocate for the peoples of Africa and all of the Global South, for their development and advancement. South Africa welcomes the adoption of the Pact for the Future and congratulate our sister country, Namibia, as well as for the Federal Republic of Germany for having ably steered the United Nations towards the adoption of the resolution in this regard. This Pact of the Future is a platform for us to focus on those actions we need to take together to build a world in which the equal worth of every person and the equal worth of every country is recognized and valued. We particularly welcome the commitments to place poverty eradication at the center of all our efforts, and for the Sustainable Development Goals financing gap in developing countries to be closed. The disparities in wealth and development within and between countries is simply unjust and unsustainable. We must continue to strive for equal treatment, for equal opportunity and advancement for all individuals and all nations. The Pact for the Future must reinvigorate international solidarity, like veins that carry sustenance to every part of the body. Solidarity is the lifeblood of human progress. It binds us together to nourish the greater good. It is achieving the greater good for the common good to which we all strive. Through dialogue, through respect for the rule of law, through the advancement of human rights, through cooperation and solidarity, we can and we will be able to achieve a better world for all the peoples of the world. I thank you.
Agradezco.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Republic of South Africa. The Assembly will now hear an address by His Excellency Mohamed Muizu, President of the Republic of Maldives. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Mr. President, Mr. Secretary General, Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon. Mr. President, congratulations on the assumption of your presidency of the General Assembly. Our appreciation also to your predecessor for his strong leadership. We extend our gratitude to the Secretary General for his tireless efforts in steering the Secretariat. We gather here today at a delicate moment in the world history. Let's not mince our words today. Humanity is in deep trouble, facing an ever-growing list of crises: conflict, poverty, hunger, climate change, the wealth gap, the cost of living crisis, migration, occupation, opioid addiction. The list goes on and on and on. In fact, I have a map here of the world with countries which are facing some sort of crisis in red. Do you see any countries in green who are not facing any crisis? Do you know why? Because we are all deep in the red. Humanity is in crisis, and in many cases, it's man-made. But we look the other way, continuing with business as usual. While the alarms are ringing, the band is still playing the same old tunes as the whole ship descends deeper and deeper into uncharted waters. We need nations united in harmony, not United Nations in misery. These are crucial times for the world, important years for my country. In 2040, the Maldives will celebrate 75 years regaining its independence. 75 years as a sovereign nation. As we look forward to that milestone in our nation's life, what we can hope to achieve? What do we wish to accomplish? And is the world ready to play its part? I took office as the President of Maldives last November, duty-bound by the aspirations of my people, the same aspirations I hold dear to my heart, not just for the present, but for the future too. Today, I'm here at the United Nations with a vision of where I want to take my country. By 2040, I wish to see the Maldives as a full-fledged developed nation, a nation that commands respect, is relevant, and one that embodies resilience, a society that is inclusive and just, a country that exemplifies sustainability and democratic governance. Destiny is not mere fate. It is a consequence of the many choices we make, the many decisions we take, and the many hours we work. Becoming a developed nation may seem like a daunting task and a distant possibility, but I can tell you this, with a goal in sight and a plan in hand, it is achievable because prevailing and even flourishing against formidable odds is nothing new for the Maldivians. In 1965, when we regained independence, we were among the poorest countries in the world. 1/3 of our population was illiterate. More than 1 out of every 10 babies were dying before their first birthday. We had no industries, barely any exports, and even fewer prospects. And in just 5 decades, we have reached upper middle income status, a feat we are incredibly proud of. I believe the Maldives can become a developed country by investing in the country's productive capacity and increasing its productivity, by transforming our economy into one that is fully digitized and driven by artificial intelligence, and most importantly, by leveraging the natural beauty and marine resources of our country. Boosting productivity will be the key to economic transformation. This we will do by reforming and strengthening our institutions, increasing our state capacity, and leveraging the private sector. We will also identify and implement policies that support investments in key sectors, such as the digital economy. The Maldives has over 1,100 islands spread across 90,000 square kilometers. Enhancing digital connectivity is key to achieving inclusive development, mobilizing economic activity, and fostering a more diversified and resilient economy. We believe the future is intelligence-driven. This is why we are working towards a digital economy that can contribute up to 15% of our GDP by 2030. This can be achieved through investing in our ICT infrastructure. We are using and expanding artificial intelligence systems to deliver essential services such as healthcare, education, and social welfare. We are also delving into cutting-edge applications of 5G technology, using drones for medical supplies, delivery and implementing smart road systems, and using AI-enhanced technology for erosion detection and environmental monitoring. The transformation can be sustainable only if we transform our education and financial systems. We need to invest in digital literacy from a young age, to build a generation that can use artificial intelligence to enhance public service delivery, build new products, and successfully compete in the global digital economy. We need to bridge the digital divide within the country, including through improving data collection and utilization. We need to strengthen the regulatory frameworks, strengthening existing institutions, cultivating startup ecosystems, and providing the impetus for the future we envision. Becoming a developed country will also require fostering new industries. This is why we are also working on building a robust financial sector in the Maldives. With this in mind, in May this year, I set up the Development Bank of Maldives with a focus on improving and investing in economic diversification. The result we desire is inclusive development, where equality of access to opportunities is guaranteed, where women and young people play key players in development, not mere spectators, and where every Maldivian citizen has adequate housing. To support objectives, my government has launched $6.5 million loan facility. It's specifically for women entrepreneurs, of which 25% is allocated to those with disabilities. In the first phase, over 100 projects will be funded across 19 of the 20 atolls and Male, and across 21 business activities. I have also recently launched a Presidential Youth Advisory Board. This board will advise and inform me directly on the needs and views of young people. Inclusivity is at the heart of one of the most ambitious large-scale urban development projects in the country's history, Ras Male. This is my promise to the Maldivian people, a solution to alleviate the long-term housing crisis, an urban oasis where citizens can fully participate in all aspects of city life. Ras Male will utilize modular housing, leverage a state-of-the-art transportation system that is accessible to all. It will be developed as a climate-resilient and safe island. Tourism drives the Maldivian economy. My vision is to expand the tourism sector further. This means building complementary industries centered around innovation and creativity. This means more sustainable and construction practices emphasizing on green and sustainable tourism. We are also expanding our main international airport, our air connectivity, and the fleet of our national airline. These steps will support the expansion of the tourism sector and at the same time generate more revenue for the country. But tourism is also highly vulnerable to external shocks, conflicts, calamities, and causes beyond our control can and have had far-reaching critical implications in the past. We need the international system to anticipate and address these threats. Threats such as armed conflicts, terrorism, violent extremism, transnational organized crime, climate change, ocean degradation, crimes that transcend national borders. Part of addressing these threats is to safeguard and protect people's fundamental rights. In 2015, the world came together to endorse humanity's fundamental rights by committing to the Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. But 6 years to the SDGs deadline, we are only on track in less than a fifth of those targets. In June, this organization, the UN, issued a report saying the world is failing to deliver on Sustainable Development Goals. This week, we agreed on a pact for the future. But do we want this document, the pact, to go the same way as this one, the 2015 SDG commitments? I'm sorry, but we can't keep doing this. We can't keep meeting, talking, pledging, but not doing. We don't want these days to come back to haunt us. The days when we had a chance but not a will. We believe the best approach to protecting fundamental rights is to cultivate a culture of respect. This requires support. The Maldives has a good track record of treaty ratification, implementation, and reporting. We champion the right to environment because we are keenly aware of the consequences of environmental degradation. We also believe that violation of a right by any country, large or small, rich or poor, with powerful friends or not, must not be tolerated. This is why the ongoing massacre, the genocide by Israel in Gaza, is a travesty of justice and the international system. The repeated destruction of homes, hospitals, schools, humanitarian infrastructure, the repeated cycles of killing of men, women, children, babies, thousands upon thousands. The world is struggling to process the deaths of so many civilians in Gaza, and now Israel raids Lebanon. claiming hundreds more civilian lives there. Their cries haunt anyone with humanity. Their tears bitter our conscience. Israel's targeting of journalists, the eyes and ears of humanity, the killing of journalists, Palestinian journalists, Lebanese journalists, Al Jazeera journalists, the closure of Al Jazeera officers. How can we interpret this as anything other than brutal attempts to prevent the world from knowing about the crimes taking place? Israel must be held accountable for these acts of terrorism, for these violations of international law and UN resolutions. We must accept a sovereign and independent Palestinian state on the pre-1967 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital. We welcome the decision to seat our brothers and sisters from Palestine with us here in the General Assembly for the first time instead of behind us. Now we must ensure that Palestine becomes a full member of the UN. Mr. President, Mr. President, the Maldives is gearing up for an economic transformation that will change lives. But our policies can deliver the results only with sufficient international financial support. The Maldives has always taken ownership and responsibility for its own development. While we have received extensive support towards our development, we urge the multilateral development funds, banks, and bilateral donors to view us as your partners, not just as recipients of aid, to stop looking at our inherent vulnerabilities as limitations, to adopt tailor-made approaches which are mutually beneficial, to reduce the cost of borrowing, to make the financial system work for us, not penalize us, to make your terms flexible, your financing less rigid, to make your lending targeted, affordable, and responsible. Mr. President, climate change is the most serious threat to our world, the defining challenge of our generation. It's washing away decades of progress in mere minutes. It's diverting already depleted resources of long-term development to emergency relief and reconstruction, preventing countries from adapting to climate impact. And the vicious cycle continues. The Maldives has always walked the talk. We are investing in renewable energy. Our goal is to have 33% of the country's electricity demand from renewable energy sources by 2028. On behalf of the Maldivian people, I implore you, do your part, act now. We must face the climate emergency head on with science, determination, and resources. The rich and emitting countries need to meet the financial pledges already made, especially on adaptation, where the financing gap continues to widen. As we work towards COP29, we must ensure the new goal on climate finance matches the level of climate action required. This means the new goal must go beyond the $100 billion. It must include as a minimum loss and damage response, mitigation and adaptation as sub-goals. One of the biggest victims of the climate crisis is the ocean. The Maldivian people and their livelihoods are dependent on the health and wealth of the ocean. We need to step up efforts to sustainably use and manage our ocean resources, address plastic pollution, conserve biodiversity, and protect endangered species. This morning, I ratified the Global Ocean Treaty. We urge you all to do the same. We urge you to do your part to address climate change, overcome pollution, and reverse biodiversity loss. The transformation the Maldives seeks cannot be achieved without an enabling global environment. Small countries like mine need a multilateral system that champions us and delivers for us. The United Nations is the epitome of the multilateral system. It is well positioned to promote sustainable development, to maintain peace and security, to promote and protect human rights, to enforce equality, the rule of law, inclusivity, and representativeness. But what we are witnessing is the opposite. Inability to stop climate change and environmental degradation, inability to stop war and genocide, inability to stop exploitation and suffering, inability to stop unequal representation. Hence, the United Nations needs reform and revitalization. It needs to be representative. The Maldives cannot and will not watch and stand idle while the multilateral system fails, because our development, our advancement, and our survival is tethered to the world. That's why the Maldives is seeking to get elected to the Economic and Social Council for the 2027 to 2029 term. We count on your support. If elected, the Maldives will strive to make the UN development system more relevant to our times, continuously recalibrating and adjusting, utilizing the latest science and evidence, listening to the variety of opinions and views. The United Nations must enforce its decisions across the UN system and at local level. The United Nations is only relevant when it makes a real difference in our lives. Mr. President, 59 years ago, the Maldives reached out to the United Nations as its first port in a sea of uncertainty. We came here to this great hall, seeking recognition, seeking a partner. We came to you as a poor and impoverished country, but with a vision of prosperity, a vision which we made great progress with your support. Today, once again, we come to you aiming higher, to reach further, and to do better, with a vision to make the Maldives a developed nation by 2040. For I believe development is destiny, and our destiny beckons towards a brighter future for the present and future generations. I thank you.
En nombre de la Asamblea, agradezco al presidente de la
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Republic of Maldives. The Assembly will now hear an address by His Excellency Emomali Rahmon, President of the Republic of Tajikistan. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
Honorable President, Excellency Secretary General, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I at the onset extend my warm words of congratulation to His Excellency Mr. Philemon Yan on his election as the President of the 79th session of the United Nations General Assembly. My heartfelt thanks also go out to His Excellency Mr. Denis Francis in recognition of his fruitful engagement as the President of the 78th session of the United Nations General Assembly. Distinguished delegates, today the world is facing up to a turbulent and intricate situation. The controversial geopolitical process, rapid weaponization, escalation of the Cold War, armed conflicts, aftermath of climate change and other global jeopardies and threats will undoubtedly give rise to the long-term negative consequences. In this context, it is critical more than ever that we consolidate joint efforts of the international community to protect security, maintain stability, and ensure overall sustainable development. Obviously, we can bring lasting peace, build a harmonious life of mankind and prosperity of countries primarily on the basis of mutual understanding and constructive cooperation. We ought to be united to achieve these objectives, bring all wars and conflicts to an end, as well as implement other peaceful goals. It is high time now to take bold and effective steps forward to strengthen the key role of the United Nations in resolving conflicts and restoring peace and stability across the planet. I, in this regard, would like to propose to adopt a special United Nations General Assembly resolution declaring the decade of promotion of peace for future generations. As I've stated time and again, Tajikistan always advocates the solution of all conflicts only through political and diplomatic means. At the same time, I would like to emphasize that the Republic of Tajikistan continues uninterrupted, unwavering support of an implementation of the 2030 Agenda to achieve Sustainable Development Goals. It is worth noting that the principal message of this agenda is also reflected in Tajikistan National Development Strategy 2030, and continued efforts are being taken to achieve the primary goals. Nevertheless, the existence of a wide range of difficulties hinder the timely financing of sustainable development. Challenges include security turmoil, economic and financial crisis, unprecedented warming due to climate change, and loss of biodiversity, as well as an outbreak of contagious diseases. In a political declaration recently adopted by the General Assembly, member states have admitted that achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals is in threat. According to the United Nations Secretary General's report, the international community will be able to achieve only 17% of Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. We are witnessing the setbacks in results achieved within the Sustainable Development Goals in many developing countries. In view of this, we need to intensify our efforts to implement the 2030 Agenda in a timely manner and pay particular attention to the financing for sustainable development. It means that we need to prioritize sustainable development for developing countries and financing with a view to facilitate and promote the sustainable development achievement. We do also believe that the 4th International Conference on Financing for Development, scheduled to be held in Spain in July 2025, as per the United Nations General Assembly resolution, will play a crucial role in exploring new approaches to remove barriers on the way to financing for development. Necessarily, the activities of the international financial and economic system should meet the needs of developing countries so that it can facilitate the timely counter-response of member states to modern threats and challenges. In that context, in order to implement the goals and programs we've outlined, we believe it is important to continue financing countries in need by international financial institutions, especially through the means of the International Development Association, IDA. Digital technologies and artificial intelligence pave the suitable ways for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. Tajikistan is taking effective and the most necessary measures for the gradual transition to digitalization system by adopting the national strategy and relevant conceptual legal acts. I, in this respect, propose to the General Assembly to adopt at its upcoming session a special resolution on the role of artificial intelligence in creating new opportunities for socio-economic development and acceleration of the Sustainable Development Goals achievement in the region of Central Asia. Tajikistan recognizes the importance of the Summit of the Future held in the framework of the current session of the United Nations General Assembly. The intergovernmental document, the Pact for the Future, adopted during the summit, plays a key role in ensuring peace, security and sustainable development, and we welcome the willingness of the international community to implement this pact. This pact was adopted at a time when millions of civilians are exposed to security risks and dangers in different regions around the world. We reckon that the international community must take joint and effective actions to withstand the threats of terrorism and extremism, radicalism, cybercrime, trafficking in narcotics and weapons smuggling, and fight other manifestations of transnational crime. Furthermore, the rise of Islamophobia, as well as the trend of practicing double standard policy in international relationships in recent years has become a matter of our deep concern. Our country constantly carries out joint actions in cooperation with the United Nations and its specialized agencies, as well as other international partners to counter security threats and challenges. Consequently, Tajikistan and the state of Kuwait, in cooperation with the United Nations Office on Counterterrorism, will hold the next high-level conference in the framework of the Dushanbe process on counter-terrorism in the city of Kuwait this November. We do believe that this platform will mainly focus on the subjects related to the persistence of inclusive security and stability and contribute to the continuation of an extended and trustful dialogue, as well as facilitate the exchange of helpful experience and ideas among the stakeholders. Ladies and gentlemen, on security matters, I would like to emphasize that the Palestinian crisis remains a matter of deep concern to our country. Today's tragic situation in this region once again proves that there is absolutely no military solution to the Palestinian case. Tajikistan believes that an ultimate and tangible solution to this conflict would be possible only through the implementation of the United Nations resolutions on recognition of an independent state of Palestine based on 1967 borders. We hope that conflicting parties will take actions for a ceasefire deal and arrange the peace negotiations, and the international community will take effective steps to restore the lasting stability in Palestine. Moreover, we uphold the establishment of enduring peace and stability, as well as economic and social development in neighboring Afghanistan. To this end, Tajikistan is always ready to accord its assistance in the revival and development of a wide range of sectors of peaceful life in Afghanistan. Subsequently, I repeatedly call on the international community to spare no effort to help the long-suffering people of Afghanistan, including regions affected by natural disasters, to prevent a humanitarian crisis in this war-torn country. Honourable delegates, ladies and gentlemen, it has been more than a year since the United Nations Water Conference 2023. According to the reports of relevant United Nations agencies, progress in water supply and sanitation, despite some improvements, does not meet our expectations. It needs to be much more done. As a result, Tajikistan, as a champion country, actively cooperates with all stakeholders to implement the commitments stemming from the Water Action Agenda of the United Nations Water Conference 2023. Successful accomplishment of these and other water-related commitments and goals will depend on effective multi-stakeholder partnerships that ensure integrated and systematic, coherent approach. In this regard, it is important for us to take advantage of Dushanbe Water Process Platform to monitor the outcomes of the United Nations Water Conference 2023. We believe that Dushanbe Water Process will play a pivotal role as a platform for a broad, inclusive dialogue of stakeholders for a comprehensive preparation for the United Nations Water Conference in Dushanbe in 2028. Your Excellencies, distinguished participants, at the backdrop of a climate change impact, the international community needs to work on collective approach and initiatives in the proper use of natural resources and the relentless activities of various fields of human life. In recent years, the natural disasters along with a series of droughts caused enormous damage to the agriculture, environment and economies of developing countries in general. Being 93% of its territory covered by mountains, Tajikistan is also vulnerable to climate change due to the frequent occurrence of natural disasters. Natural disasters annually bring damage to the national economy of Tajikistan worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and unfortunately in many cases they cause death toll. Climate change is causing the accelerated melting of glaciers and reduce water volume in the rivers in different parts of the world, including in Central Asia. This process has a negative impact on real sectors of national economy such as energy, industry and agriculture. To date, more than 1,000 out of 14,000 Tajikistan glaciers, which are the main source of drinking water in the region, have completely melted, and the pace of their melting is dramatically increasing. This is despite the fact that precipitation and glaciers of Tajikistan make up to 60% of the source of water resources in Central Asia. While the United Nations General Assembly's declaration of 2025 as the International Year of Glaciers Preservation at the initiative of Tajikistan provides a suitable basis for a developing cooperation among stakeholders. Pursuant to this United Nations General Assembly resolution, March 21st was declared as the World Glaciers Day, and an international trust fund to promote the glaciers preservation was established under the auspices of the United Nations Secretary-General. Concurrently, the first high-level international conference on glaciers preservation will be hosted in Dushanbe, Tajikistan next year. Taking this opportunity, we call on partner countries and organizations to actively participate and contribute to the arrangement and conduct of this conference. We believe that this important international conference, which is scheduled to be held in cooperation with UNESCO and the World Meteorological Organization, will play an effective role in assessing the global glaciers problems and exploring specific approaches and ways for their effective solutions. Alongside with this, we invite all partners to financially contribute to the International Glaciers Trust Fund. It is worth highlighting that to further advance the glaciers preservation agenda, Tajikistan, together with France, has put forward another initiative to declare 2025-2034 a decade of action for cryospheric sciences.
Our country has adopted a national strategy for adaptation to climate change 2030 based on its international obligations, including specific provisions of the Paris Agreement. Evidently, one of the ways to successfully mitigate the challenges related to climate change is the development of a green economy, which in turn calls for green energy development. Considering the importance of this reality, our country has approved and currently is implementing the Green Economy Development Strategy for 2023-2037. We currently produce 98% of our electricity from the country's hydroelectric power resources, and we are ranked the 6th in the world in terms of the share of greener energy produced from renewable sources. The goal of the implementation of our plans in this direction is to turn Tajikistan into a green country by 2037. Today, finding solutions to the daily issues of adaptation to climate change and reducing the severity of its negative consequences is considered one of the top priorities for the international community. We hope that developed countries, the United Nations and its specialized agencies, influential international financial institutions, and other international and regional multilateral entities will further continue to pay serious attention to these important and critical issues. We are convinced that the international community succeeds to achieve its common goals and objectives through the development of trustful dialogue, mutual understanding, and constructive, rewarding cooperation. I thank you for your attention.
Agradezco en
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Republic of Tajikistan. The Assembly will now hear an address by His Excellency Gitanas Nausėda, President of the Republic of Lithuania. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
Dear President of the General Assembly, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, over the last 2 days in this very room, global leaders welcomed the Pact for the Future. Together, we reaffirmed our commitment for multilateralism anchored in the 3 pillars of the United Nations: sustainable development, peace, and security, and human rights. These are all great and noble principles that have defined the essence of the United Nations systems since the end of the Second World War. Most significant global political developments, from decolonization to the end of the Cold War and the singing revolutions in Europe, have seemed to bring us closer to the bright future of peace, freedom, and human dignity. While this international rules-based world order was never perfect, it helped us to search for joint solutions. For many decades, we have been trying to resolve multiple conflicts and crises and address emerging global challenges such as climate change, unequal development, food insecurity, terrorism, and illegal migration. And then, more than 10 years ago, something entirely different happened. a permanent member of the Security Council began military aggression against a peaceful member state. At first, covertly, then more and more openly, breaking ever more international norms. And finally, Russia started the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Today, even though we face yet another distressing crisis in the Middle East, as well as rising tensions in the Indo-Pacific region, the Russian war of aggression is the most dangerous threat. The entire international order, defined by sovereignty, territorial integrity, and inviolability of borders, is under assault in Ukraine. Each and every member of the United Nations, every sovereign nation, has also much to lose. To fully understand what is presently at stake, we must all start paying attention to the words of Russian leaders and their representatives at the United Nations Security Council. How many times they have openly admitted the Kremlin intends to wipe Ukraine from the face of earth. If any sovereign nation is under the threat of complete destruction, no country is truly safe anymore. If the international community looks away and ignores the unpleasant truth, no country is safe anymore. And if mass killings, deportation, and deliberate actions on civilian population became the new norm, no country is truly safe anymore. That should be perfectly clear to anyone. That should disturb us all. Ladies and gentlemen, what Russia presents to the world is a return to the era of imperial conquest, colonial domination, and genocide. And I do not believe we are ready to follow this path. I do not believe any of us want to see powerful neighbors convincing themselves that from now on every dispute should be settled by force. Therefore, right now, Ukraine is fighting not only a war of self-defense. Ukraine is also fighting for the future of all those countries who believe in the United Nations Charter and its principles. Ukraine is fighting for us all. And yet, our joint collective response to this day is insufficient. We have not been able to stop this madness. We have not been able to force Russia to reconsider its dangerous course. We have not been able to hold it accountable for so many violations of the United Nations Charter. Why was that the case? Because to this day, the aggressor is hiding under the cover of the Security Council's permanent membership, hiding in plain sight, mocking every one of us with its unrestricted veto power. It is a terrible blow to the very credibility of the United Nations system. And still we keep hearing some calls for Ukraine to surrender, to compromise on its sovereignty and territorial integrity, or to accept Russia's ultimatums. Why should the aggressor be rewarded? Why should appeasement work this time when it failed so spectacularly almost 90 years ago? Why should the victim agree to the demands of the aggressor, sitting safe in the Kremlin after so much bloodshed and loss of innocent lives? Ukraine is still fighting. Ukraine is still going strong, regardless of all the appeasers and doomsayers. And only Ukraine has the right to determine the actual conditions for peace. Meanwhile, we have the duty to support Ukraine, to restrict Russia's ability to wage war and ensure the accountability of those responsible for the crime of aggression and crimes against humanity. to reform the Security Council, and to rebuild the credibility of the United Nations Charter. To withstand enormous pressure and win this war, Ukraine will need more military equipment, ammunition, medical supplies. Ukraine also urgently needs humanitarian and financial aid. This upcoming winter will be extremely difficult for the Ukrainian people. Constant deliberate Russian attacks on critical energy infrastructure have destroyed more than 80% of Ukraine's thermal energy generation and a third of its hydro generation. To prevent a humanitarian catastrophe, our assistance should be swift and focused on the energy sector. Lithuania calls on other parties, including Belarus, Iran, North Korea, and China, to stop providing Russia with military support, including the transfer of dual-use materials. More arms for Russia means more civilian deaths, more civilian infrastructure destroyed, more chaos. There is only one path towards comprehensive, just, and lasting peace: Ukraine's peace formula. It deserves universal support because it is based on the universal principles of the United Nations Charter: sovereignty, territorial integrity, and international law. Lithuania urges all peace-loving countries to actively engage in these efforts, including preparation for and participation in the next summit of the peace formula. The war could enter the end phase tomorrow if only Russia agrees to disengage and withdraw its forces from all the occupied territories. Ukraine does not want Russia's territories. It wants to liberate its own people, not Russia's. It wants to see prisoners of war and abducted children, thousands of them, returned. It wants the constant, deliberate bombing of civilian infrastructure, of so many schools, hospitals, and power stations to finally stop. To achieve lasting peace, more actions will have to follow. Justice will have to be served. Russia will have to atone for its many crimes and pay damages. The main culprits of the war of aggression and numerous war crimes will have to stand before the court. Vladimir Putin is already under an arrest warrant by the International Criminal Court for his crimes, specifically unlawful deportation and unlawful transfer of children. Immobilized Russian foreign assets should also be used to pay for the damage done to Ukraine. Finally, we must all join forces in pushing for a comprehensive Security Council reform. There is simply no place for Russia in the Security Council, which was created to maintain international peace and security. Excellencies, Lithuania hopes to witness Ukraine's victory soon. Until this becomes reality, Lithuania's position remains steadfast. We will not recognize Russia's illegal annexation of any Ukrainian region, be it Crimea, Sevastopol, Donetsk, Kherson, Luhansk, or Zaporizhia. We will not stop demanding that Russia ends grave violations of human rights and fundamental freedoms in the occupied territories of Ukraine. Lithuania will continue providing shelter to Ukrainian war refugees. Lithuania will continue supporting Ukraine with all possible means. Ladies and gentlemen, today, as the political divisions deepen and democracy seems to falter all around the globe, multilateralism remains our greatest hope. The United Nations has a crucial role to play not only in Ukraine, but also in the Middle East, Sahel, Horn of Africa, and in the Indo-Pacific region. We, as representatives of the international community, cannot remain indifferent in the face of the global crisis. We cannot stay silent on the breaches of international law and universal human rights, thus normalizing them. The pursuit of peace and justice requires our collective determination. It requires our unwavering adherence to the guiding principles of the United Nations. Now, as always, Lithuania is committed to promoting democracy, human rights, and accountability on the global stage. We call on all the members of the United Nations to unite in securing a better future for all, a future where every sovereign country is protected from imperialism and every human being from arbitrary violence and war. Let us build a safe future together. Thank you.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Republic of Lithuania. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Julius Maada Bio, President of the Republic of Sierra Leone. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
Madam President, I congratulate His Excellency Philmon Yang on his election as President of the 79th session of the United Nations Secretary General and express Sierra Leone's support to you during your tenure. I extend my deep gratitude to His Excellency Denis Francis for his principled stewardship as President of the 78th session of the United Nations General Assembly. I appreciate and thank His Excellency Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, for his tireless effort and global leadership. Madam President, more than 30 years ago, Sierra Leone was plunged into a decade-long brutal civil war. More than 50,000 people were killed, and millions fled their homes as refugees and internally displaced persons. The situation in Sierra Leone at that time was not unique. Conflicts existed in other parts of West Africa, in Africa, and around the world. In Sierra Leone, however, we overcame our challenges with a common vision for peace through genuine dialogue, committed leadership, and action. Notably, the hard-won peace we enjoy is not without its fragility, and we remain vigilant in safeguarding it. Sierra Leone's peace journey exemplifies the values of ownership, engagement through dialogue, and our partnership with ECOWAS, the United Nations, and the broader international community, which yielded the peace dividend. This story has shaped our engagement at the United Nations Security Council since the commencement of our second tenure in January this year. For almost 9 months, Sierra Leone, as an elected member of the United Nations Security Council, has endeavored to be a voice of reason and a bridge builder with balance and objectivity. We will continue to promote respect for and adherence to international law and the UN Charter, ensure the protection of civilians, end impunity through accountability, and foster dialogue for the peaceful settlement of disputes. Our commitment to these principles is even more imperative now than ever before, as we are confronted with conflicts of great magnitude in the Middle East, Africa, Asia, and Europe. The need for a ceasefire in Gaza and the wider Middle East, as well as in Sudan, Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, and Ukraine, is not just pressing, but urgent. Immediate action is required to prevent further loss of precious lives and human suffering. We need collective action to stop all conflicts and engage in meaningful dialogue so that the countries can move forward with their development agenda in peace, security, and stability. As a country that has experienced the devastating consequences of armed conflict, we acknowledge that peace cannot be achieved in isolation. It requires inclusive political process.